Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Check the Kick podcast. The show can be found on Sherdog.com. And I just want to start by apologizing for missing last week's show. Things happen in life, and sometimes we just got to roll with the punches and keep on ticking. So we're back with another episode. I think we might be like 16, 17 episodes in. On the Sherdog platform, at least, which is super dope. Shout out to Sherdog, as always. Really cool website. You should check it out sometime. Big fights this past weekend. I'm recording this on Monday the 9th, which is Indigenous Peoples Day. So I have the day off. So that's cool. Nice holiday. Again, big weekend of fights. Bellator 300 and then UFC 80. Some cool fights, some lackluster stuff. Bellator was a slog. Shout out to the top two fights on that card, but everything else was just a Kai Kamaka had a good win, but highly contested and just a tough watch all around. Shout out to all the Sherdog colleagues that covered Bellator 300 live. I know Ben was one of them, and it just seemed like an absolute slog. I watched it back. Of course, I didn't watch any of the broadcasts. I just watched it fight by fight, and even watching it fight by fight, God, it was just hard to watch. UFC 80 Vegas was an interesting card, and it got capped off pretty well. We're going to touch back on that. Starting off with Bellator 300. Usman Nurmagomedov gets another super clean win, an unblemished win against Brent Primus, 50-45, just outclassed him. It's kind of crazy what Eagles MMA and Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov was able to do with these guys. You know, his unfortunate passing, it was very terrible. Passed away due to COVID complications during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. But you got to, look at that camp. From such a small place in the world, such a small team, to have so many people that are at this high level is just amazing. Habib Nurmagomedov was his own beast, in my opinion, the most dominant fighter in the history of MMA, where he was just able to dish out so much damage and so much dominance over his opponents while really not taking much damage in return. And then you've got guys like Islam Makhachev, who is the current UFC lightweight champion. He's amazing in his own right. And then we've got Usman Nurmagomedov, another lightweight that is the world champion, 18-0, undefeated under the Bellator banner. I know we're not supposed to curse too much due to the YouTube algorithm, but it's not Usman's fault. His competition is who it is, but he's fucking good, man. Like, Brent Primus went to war with Chandler multiple times. Usman went out there and just pitched a shutout. He is winning these fights, and he's not getting touched. The question mark kick to submission against Benson Henderson, you can go to Sherdog.com and look up Benson Henderson's whole entire fight record and fight career. The dude doesn't get submitted. Yes, he's older, blah, 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 but Usman went out there and submitted him. And what he did to Primus was, at the end of the fight, Brent Primus was just like, I couldn't get my range going. I couldn't find this dude. Usman's ability to measure the range and negate damage is actually something really special. He's a great wrestler. Everyone from that camp, they're all amazing wrestlers. But I think we need to start realizing that not everyone that was under the Abdulmanap training and under AK, none of these dudes are the same. They're all great wrestlers. They all have a great wrestling base. But outside of Habib was a decent striker in his own right, but he was much more of a punishing super athlete, really, really relied on his grappling and coral belt jiu-jitsu from Habib, even though he was a white belt. Just amazing. But Usman is a lot more like Umar with the kicking game, the range game, the feints. He was the liver kicks. Every time Brent Primus did anything, he just got kicked in the liver over and over again. The dude took so many body shots. if you're seeing something new behind me, by the way, I got a new picture. Hung another one, but it fell and broke, and there was glass everywhere this morning, so that was really cool. But this is from a local artist. It's a osprey grabbing a salmon. Okay, sorry, I just noticed it. With Usman, his kicking game, his kicking dexterity, and his kicking tools, and his ability to pressure, feint, throw the teep kick. Brent Primus is probably peeing blood still. He got teep kicked to hell. Anytime Usman wanted to let his hands go, he would let his hands go. He would start every exchange with the feint, and then the second he would first show the feint, then he would teep kick to the body, then he would feint again, and then just fire like a slick 1-2. And then anytime Primus would fire back, he was just out of dodge. His defense is so sound. He's such a smart and technical dude. And then in the end of the first round, he gets that like knee tap takedown. Brent Primus hit him with like one elbow on a clinch break. I think that was like in the start of the second round. But Usman's ability to just negate damage at all ranges, whether he's in the boxing range, in the clinch, close up, these dudes are right on top of each other. Usman's getting underhooks, and if he's not going for the takedown, he's just getting out of the pocket and not being hit by Primus really like at all. It got to the point where after the first 3 rounds were so dominant, it kind of, again, we go back to Khabib, but it kind of reminded me of the Khabib Al Iaquinta, where like he just started to try stuff. He knew he has another fight coming up in this Grand Prix, and he was like, I'm just going to try shit. Primus had no answers. I always thought Primus was a pretty large lightweight, especially like compared to Michael Chandler, who's more of like a short, stout dude. But Usman looked big in there. He uses his range tools just so well. I'm really curious to see how he would do against someone like AJ McKee, which is probably going to be a fight that's going to be happening for him soon. Again, it's not this kid's fault that he is fighting in Bellator, and good for him for being in Bellator, because why? First off, Islam, which is like, basically a family member to him, is the UFC lightweight champion. So there's no conflict. These dudes can just reign, over their kingdoms in both of their two different organizations, and not have issues where they don't have to bump into each other. They don't have to butt heads. I imagine, all the bullshit that Khabib and Islam had to go through, being main training partners, being basically family members, and both fighting in the same division and both having the same exact aspirations. Khabib's dad, if you ask Khabib's dad always thought Islam was the better one. Put all of his eggs in Islam's basket. All 3 of these guys have super unique and different fighting styles. And if you really think about it, you can tell that they're definitely all training together, and they've all been hard sparring together for so long. Usman's game, if you really think about it and you try to like compare it to Khabib's game, or like how would they match up, you could see like, okay, Usman is definitely a good wrestler. He's very opportunistic with his grappling, but his striking is so risk averse. And when I say risk averse, it's really damage averse. Like he knows his range. So I could see there's probably been a ton of sparring sessions where Usman and Khabib have gone at it, and maybe Usman was able to keep Khabib at range, someone that's so dangerous like Khabib. And then Islam is kind of like a mixture of Khabib and Usman in a way. So it's just super cool. Really cool for Bellator to be putting this kid at the top of the card. They're putting him over Cyborg, which is, that means a lot. Cyborg is just a true MMA OG in women's MMA and MMA all around. We're going to talk about her in a second. But just a damn good job from Usman. He pitched a shutout here. If this is the end of it for Bellator, there were rumblings where like the Linton Vassell fight fell through with Ryan Bader, and Bader was asking for money, and so apparently he came out and said that Bellator didn't want to pay him and all these things. So I don't know what this means. If there's going to be some sort of acquisition where PFL like purchase Bellator, those rumors have been spiraling around us in the MMA sphere for a long time. about a month or two now at this point. With the whole thing with like Cedric Dombe and PFL and UFC, I would be surprised to see this be like a Strikeforce UFC transition where that many people come over. I'm going to assume that if Bellator just goes away and like all their fighters become free agents, a lot of them will go to PFL, but maybe a select few will go to the UFC. All the UFC washouts, they ain't going back to UFC. Like, why the hell would Corey Anderson want to go back to UFC? He had his problems getting fights with the UFC and all of his issues with the UFC and the matchmakers and everything. Corey Anderson ain't going back to the UFC. He's totally going to the PFL. But dudes like Usman and AJ McKee, those dudes may make their way. Those dudes may make their way over to the UFC, which would be super interesting. We could also see a lot of these dudes going to Rizin, like Juan Archuleta. That dude's definitely going to Rizin if Bellator goes away. It's going to be super interesting to see what Bellator does in the future after this major 300 event. I tell you right now, the UFC 300 is not going to look anything like this. This was kind of a shitty show for a big numbered Bellator 300, and like this is what they gave us. But again, huge shout out to Usman. The dude killed it. He's amazing. He's a great talent. I would love to see him in a fight with someone like Gamrot. Gamrot's told Polish media he's the backup fighter for the Islam and Charles Oliveira rematch here coming up soon in about 2 weeks. Yeah. Just go watch Usman, guys. Like if you're not a Bellator person and you dunk on Bellator, just go watch this kid. He's really good, man. Moving on to the second fight down the card. Another Cyborg shit kicking. Cyborg just beats the crap out of Cat Zingano. Gets a round one stoppage. Zingano would try to get her wrestling going, and Cyborg's like, "You're not gonna." I weigh like 40 pounds more than you do, and I'm probably also 8 times stronger than you physically. And anytime you try to get any grappling going on me, I'm just gonna pancake you and punish you for it. And it took like 2 bad wrestling takedown attempts for Cyborg to just be like, nah, and just don't hammer fist the shit out of her. She just pancaked Cat Zingano. This is a squash match, which is like 90% of Cyborg's MMA career, all squash matches, besides her Amanda Nunes fight, which could potentially go another way if they would have ever fight again. It was kind of funny after the fight ended. Cyborg went over there to kind of be like, hey, water under the bridge. You know, I'm the champ. I beat the shit out of you really easily. And Cat Zingano was just like upset, telling her to get the, basically get the F off me. If this fight happened 100 times, like there's not even a banana peel moment. Like Cyborg wins this fight 100 out of 100 times, in my opinion. I did not see the strength and physicality discrepancy in this fight was just so stark. It was just so obvious. And that's how it is against anyone that Cyborg is going to fight. In MMA, being an athlete matters so much, but in women's MMA, especially in this division, like being a true brute athlete, I mean, it will make or break you as a fighter. We're going to talk about future matchmaking for Cyborg, so I won't touch on that, but there are other women and other organizations that have similar athleticism and physicality to Cyborg that heavily rely on that, and it really makes a difference. Cyborg is just a beast, dude. She could continue to do this for another 5 years. Yeah, like what are they going to do? Match her up against Zara Farron or Megan Anderson? Like she's just going to go kill these types of chicks. This fight was over in like a minute. It was just a squash match. A couple squash matches. That's the Saturday night. I didn't decide to go over the Drew Dober fight but another fight where it just looked like it's a squash match. Very interesting too. Super different than the fight before this one on the Bellator card. Cyborg is great though. She's going to continue to do this forever. She's going to continue to get these paychecks. It looks like they already brought Leah McCourt in there. That's her next fight. That's one great thing about Bellator, where this isn't like Bellator is not like the UFC when you get these guys that are almost forced to go up in weight class to, prove that they're great. In Bellator, if you're if you're a champ and you hold the title, you can just take the next guy or the next girl. Like, you just fight the next title challenger, and it just is what it is. You don't really have to prove anything to anybody, which that's great as a fighter because it doesn't put so much pressure on you. I mean, the perfect example is Cyborg. Like, for Cyborg to prove her greatness, she had to fight Amanda Nunes, and she got knocked the fuck out for it. And even for Volk, as great as Volkanovski is for all of us, we all probably think Volkanovski is one of the best fighters in the world, one of the best fighters to ever do it. But to prove his greatness, he had to go fight Islam, and he lost. Big shout out to Cyborg. Great win. And we're going to go ahead and just wrap up that Bellator card. Ilima McFarlane missed weight. That's a fight that just shouldn't have happened. She misses weight. They're friends. It was just super confusing. Super confusing. They both wanted the fight, and then Ilima hurts her knee in the 4th round. Thank God, because we didn't get another round of it. Kind of wraps that Bellator card, and I'm curious to see what happens next, where Bellator goes. In the comments down below, put what you guys think happens to Bellator. Let me know what you think. I'm curious. Moving on to my personal highlight of Saturday night, Bobby Green gets a 33-second KO over Grant Dawson. Grant Dawson was a 5-1 favorite. Bobby was a 4-1 dog. He's 37 years old. And he just goes out there and one punches Dawson. This was very reminiscent of Anderson Silva, Forrest Griffin, and the way that the fight just played out, where the dude got hit with something that seemed kind of unassuming, and he was just dead for it. I'm a huge Bobby Green fan. I like what Bobby Green stands for. I like his idea behind fighting. I like the attitude he brings into fighting. I like the messages he gives to people after he fights. The dude came from nothing. The dude was a straight up orphan. He's always talking about, bringing people together and blah, 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 all that stuff. And the whole week, he seemed to maybe be in Grant Dawson's head a little bit. Like, in the stare downs, they walked up and Bobby was kind of, bumping his gums at him, saying oh, I saw you in the training video, saying my name when you're hitting the pads. Where's that energy now? Blah, blah, blah. And then in the octagon, Bobby Green was refusing to dap up Dawson. Dawson wanted to dap him up. Bobby was no, F that. Dawson came out to it's some Disney song. Dude, you already lost a fight coming out to that song. Sidebar, Grant Dawson is just a kind of a boring fighter, in my opinion. And I hate to say this, but we as media and as fight analysts, and even the betting people that, Vegas putting these lines together, we put way too much stock in that Damir Ismagulov fight, where Damir literally was retired due to medical reasons, and then comes back and loses very badly to Grant Dawson. I think we put way too much stock in that. Because in his fight with Marco Madsen, he got dropped in the first round. did Grant Dawson, and got hurt and came back because Marco Madsen is just not that good. Like, he's fine. He's a UFC caliber, but he's not that great. But Ricky Glenn, we just saw Ricky Glenn just get deaded in the same card by Drew Dober, and he fought to a draw with Ricky Glenn. The UFC made it seem like he was on this, crazy streak of no losses, but that Ricky Glenn, like, he won 2 rounds and then got 10-8'd. The Leonardo Santos, where he won via hammer fist with 1 second left, you could just poke a lot of holes in Dawson's record, and I think we were just looking at the record as wins, where, like, yeah, you beat Julian Erosa at 140, like Mike Trezano, Mark Madsen. Damir Usmagulov was his only good win, in my opinion, really. But again, Damir Usmagulov was retired. Said he was retired due to medical issues. Maybe he just wanted a fight to get some coin real quick. Maybe he didn't give a shit. Damir Usmagulov was great, but we've seen since then that things have just been going on. Bobby, on the other hand, has just fought everybody. Bobby's a dog. Bobby always shows up to fight. In his fight with Drew Dober, he was schooling Drew Dober till he got caught. He was having success against Dustin Poirier till he got caught. I thought Bobby Green beat Thiago Moises. He's got a lot of really close fights. I thought Bobby Green also beat Rafael Fiziev. This dude went toe-to-toe with Fiziev, rolling shots, taking shots. Yeah, he lost to Islam Makhachev. Big deal. But outside of that, like, he's got that young veteran syndrome where he's not really young anymore because he's freaking 37. But, like, if you're not hurting him, you're not beating him. And I think Bobby really, has kind of turned a new leaf ever since he knocked out Alaya Quinta back in 21. He's really showed, like, hey, I'm going to not just be a counterpuncher. I'm going to get on the front foot and hurt people. And that's what he did to Dawson. It wasn't a jab, and it was more like he was in between a stance switch. So he was like a little bit square, and he just fired a straight left, straight down the pike, crushed Dawson. Dawson goes folding to the ground. He's already out, gets in some hammer fist. Ref jumps in, stops the action, and it's all over. I don't think Dawson came into this fight very confident. His walkout music was strange. For a dude on a win streak like Dawson, getting his first main event opportunity, like, he wasn't doing anything to win fans over. I just thought it was super weird. Like, what are you walking out to this music for, dude? Bobby Green walks out to Ski. Just hilarious. Like, Bobby Green knows what he's doing. Like, he knows how to get fans. And Dawson, man, like, this kid, potentially had title aspirations. He was ranked number 10 in the division. I think he was a little bit high, based on what I've seen from him. Either way, Bobby Green's going to take that ranking. When you beat somebody, you take all their wins. So Bobby Green is going to take that win. The dude had like 29 pro fights before Grant Dawson even made his MMA debut. Fucking Bobby Green fought all the way back on Bully Beatdown. Like, Bobby Green has been doing this for so long. Shout out to him. He's going to be ranked. I didn't matchmake for Cyborg or Usman because Cyborg already kind of made her match with Leo McCord, and Usman's part of a Grand Prix, so he's got a match set. But for Bobby Green, Moicano was chirping about him, saying, hey, let's fight, blah, blah, blah. I know Grant Dawson's his boy because they're ATT dudes, but Dan Hooker's the fight to make for Bobby Green. Clearly Dan Hooker. Both of these dudes are OGs. Both of these dudes have fought guys and lost to guys like Dustin Poirier. I'd say Hooker has definitely maybe got higher up the mountain than Bobby as far as matchmaking, but similar results once put up against, higher competition. And I think both of them where they're at with the damage that they've accrued, where they're at in the rankings. Bobby Green don't give a fuck. Excuse my language, but Bobby Green doesn't care about a title. He's 37. This is the best win of his career. He's the highest ranked he'll ever be. And again, this dude has had close fights with guys like Rafael Fiziev, who just had a close fight with Justin Gaethje. Over 5 rounds, Bobby Green is probably going to be in a couple more 5-round fights, and I hope he renegotiates his contract after this, especially with the new accrued ranking, because he will deserve it. And Bobby Green over 5 rounds, like if you look at his fight with Fiziev, clearly won the 3rd round, tons of success in the 2nd, even tons of success in the 1st. This dude could be an issue in 5-round fights for people. He's got great defense, great striking. He can put it together. He can strike out of both stances. And he's just so cool. Like, Bobby Green's a cool ass dude. He was on a podcast with Mike Tyson, with maybe Tyson was there, but I know Rampage is there, and he was talking about how he smokes 15 blunts a day. Like, Bobby Green just don't give a shit. He was trying to bring his homies into the octagon after his win, and DC's like, no, dude, you can't do that. He's just got such a cool story, man. I don't know anyone that doesn't like Bobby Green. Final fight from that card we're going to talk about, Joe Pyfer. Joe Pyfer gets a pretty brutal head and arm choke over Abdulrazak Alhassan. Alhassan, when you tap, and this goes to anyone, you don't tap with a closed fist, because then it just looks like you're punching. And you don't want to look like Abdulrazak Alhassan, because he was like convulsing after that finish. That was tough to watch. I'm sure his mom and dad, or I'm sure he's got some loved ones. That wasn't pretty to see. Joe Pyfer comes out and he's just kind of throwing lots of bombs with good volume on Abdulrazak Alhassan, causing Alhassan to shell up, kind of roll with a lot of shots. Nothing really seemed to impact him too much, but he's definitely causing Alhassan to pillar and, get blown back against the octagon. Joe Pyfer does everything with such intensity. Towards the end of the first round, Abdulrazak started landing some really good leg kicks, and I was like, "Oh, Joe Pyfer don't like this." Sorry, wet the whistle. Joe Pyfer, and then the second round starts, and he's kind of getting beat up with these leg kicks, and I'm like, oh shit, he's being forced to take the back foot, and 3 or 4 or 5 more leg kicks. This fight may have ended very differently, because these leg kicks were definitely impacting Joe Pyfer. If you look at Abdulrazak Alhassan, he's shorter than I am. I'm 6 feet tall. He's probably 5'10". Easy 185. Dude's giant. His legs are this big around, kicking Joe Pyfer's legs to bits. Joe Pyfer goes, ooh, my leg hurts. I'm just going to go take this dude down. Takes him down. Abdulrazak Alhassan is just dying on this guillotine. I thought he was going to get Von Flood or Von Prude. I thought he was going to get Von Flood. Second he lets go of that guillotine, Joe Pyfer just steps over, sinks in the head and arm triangle, and literally Abdulrazak Alhassan is tapping like this, where it looks like he's trying to punch out of it. Ref doesn't stop it. Probably should have. He's gargling at that point probably, and just gets put right to sleep. He's convulsing and shit. Joe Pyfer did great. He showed great wrestling. His high amplitude takedowns were great. Abdulrazak using the guillotine to get up from the first takedown in the first round was pretty slick. But if you look at Abdulrazak Alhassan's record, the dude's never won a decision. So if you can get him if you get him 6 minutes into a fight, you're going to win it, because if he doesn't win in the first 6 minutes. And Abdulrazak definitely fought a little bit more, measured, and he fought measured. Abdulrazak fought measured in his last fight and kind of got tagged up a little bit by Claudio Ribeiro, and then he goes out there and just smokes him. So Abdulrazak is a dangerous dude, but I thought he was kind of a step down a little bit, in my opinion. Joe Pyfer, just the double legs, the blast doubles, everything he does is just with high intensity. And if he can keep this up, for 3 rounds or even 2.5, he's gonna be a problem. He comes from a good camp, got great training partners around him. Andre Petrosky comes from that camp. Sean Brady comes from that camp. Pat Sabatini, that Gracie camp up in the Northeast. All those dudes are really good. All those dudes are super, super good. And Joe Pyfer is that dude. He came out and said that he wants to renegotiate his contract. He also came out and had the American flag, said, all these other countries are so diehard for their fighters, but American fans are so fickle. And that is true. The American fan base sucks. We will be so quick to just shit on one of our guys or gals, but at the same time, 80% of good MMA training comes out of the United States, so we have a plethora, and our plates are full. Joe Pyfer, man, I want to see him. He said he wants to renegotiate his contract. I want to see him. If he renegotiates his contract, he's going to. He's probably one of the handful of guys that can actually pick up the phone and have a direct conversation with Dana White. That's not a champ. Obviously, maybe a month or two ago, Dana was like coming back from a Vegas nightclub. It was like 1 a.m, goes on live. Habib hops on the Instagram live with him, and then Dana's like, yeah, we're going to do the documentary. So I guess ESPN's doing a Habib documentary, which is dope. But not many dudes have that connection to Dana. Habib is very special. But Joe Pyfer seems to have that relationship with the UFC. He said he loves the UFC. Looping back to the flag thing, flags are allowed again. Dana White in the post-fight presser, he stated, we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. We want everybody to be able to come back out with their flags back on. But it's like, you're the one that took the flags away. Us fans didn't say we didn't want flags. Very interesting that they take the flags away kind of towards the height of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And then literally the day that they allow flags back in, the Israel-Palestine stuff starts happening. I'm not going to talk about that stuff anymore. Just an interesting timeline to allow the flags to come back in. It's neither here nor there. For Joe Pyfer, matchmaking with him. He said he wants to renegotiate his contract. If he does and he gets paid what he wants to get paid, he deserves to fight somebody in the top 15 at this point, because I think he's good enough for that. Him versus Fluffy Hernandez would be great. I'm not looking at the Sherdog rankings right now, because the Sherdog rankings has other organizations matched into the top 15, and Joe Pyfer only fights in the UFC. So you have to base it probably on what the UFC rankings are. Anthony Hernandez is ranked number 15. By the way, the Sherdog rankings are better than anyone else's rankings. I like him versus Fluffy. I like him versus Andre Muniz. I also like him versus the loser of Paul Craig versus Brendan Allen. Nasruddin Imavov just pulled out of a fight, unfortunately, which fucking sucks. I guess he was like in the ICU. Ikram Alaskirov is now fighting Warley Alves. Ugh. Up a weight class. Warley Alves is coming off of mad losses. And Ikram is just way too good to be fighting a dude like that. But let's give Joe Pyfer someone in the top 15. Him and Fluffy would be a rumble. That would be so dope. Middleweight's kind of getting better. Middleweight's kind of getting better. Guys like this, keep popping up. So let's see him fight any of those three guys. I think that is good matchmaking for him. I'm starting to like Joe Pyfer. My only issue with him is that he had to start taking damage, and he had to start, and it's kind of similar to what we saw with the Bellator middleweight champion, where, he had to take a huge cut over his eye before he went out there and just said, screw this, I'm going to go finish Fabian Edwards. So maybe, he has the intensity, but let's just start to hone in that hey, you don't have to take a bunch of leg kicks to just go take this dude down and head and arm triangle choke him, because he probably could have done that, in the first takedown. Either way, man, he did great. And the UFC 80 wasn't terrible. It started off pretty slowly. Nathan Manis gets that round 1 knockout over Mendonça, and that was a very funny, like, Mendonça literally like lasted 3 rounds with Javid Basharat and then just dies on a leg lock. Like, that was funny. Karolina Kowalkiewicz is on a 4-fight win streak now, defeating Belbita. Joaquin Buckley beat Alex Morono, and we already talked about Drew Dober. And then Bill Algeo got a nice win over Alexander Hernandez. If you haven't seen those fights, go back and watch them. All around pretty good card with UFC 80. It turned out to be okay. All right, guys, moving on to the final segment of the show. We kind of spent a long time breaking down Out with the Old. Wanted to take a little bit more time to go over Bellator 300 and UFC Vegas 80, especially after taking a week off. Again, I apologize for that, guys. Stuff happens in life. But we're going to hop into this next UFC card coming up next weekend. And I'm going to only give you 2 fights because there's not much on the card, in my opinion. First fight, we have Adrian Yanez versus Jonathan Martinez, and he's no longer letting it slide if you say Adrian Yanez. It's Adrian Yanez. That's what he wants to go by, and that's what we're gonna respect that, and that's what we're gonna do. Odds on this fight are to pick 'em. Vegas has this as basically a dead pick 'em. Saw some places where Yanez was like -105 and Martinez was like -115. Then I saw some, inversed. Pick 'em fight. This is a dope fight. Both of these guys have done good things in the UFC. Right now, Yanez is coming off a loss, but we've got Martinez coming off of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-fight win streak where he beat Said Nurmagomedov in a very close fight. That TKO leg kick against Cub Swanson. Cub Swanson was attempting to go down a weight class this far in his career. That fight shouldn't have happened. Alejandro Perez, that was a decent fight. The knockout to Davy Grant in the second round, that was back in 2021, even though it seems like it was just yesterday. He got deaded by Davy Grant. Davy Grant is a dude that's got lead in his gloves, though. He fights like he's got to roll nickels in each hand. The dude's got mad power. Adrian Yanez, super slick boxer, Texas dude, was on a hell of a streak until he met up with Rob Font. That was back in April of 2023, where he got knocked out in round 1, where he had success against Rob Font. But I think I really, really like Adrian Yanez. I've interviewed the guy. He's a great guy. He's super nice. His head coach passed away, and he kind of took over the head coach's role. He's a young father. The guy had a lot of shit going on. When I interviewed Yanez, this was years ago, right after the Contender Series, where he was like still a meter reader. He was literally working full time as a meter reader in Texas. And then, all this stuff happened with his head coach passing away. And the kid just had a lot on his plate. I'm calling him a kid. He's not a kid. The guy had a lot of shit on his plate, just a lot of food on his plate, a lot to deal with, becoming your mentor, taking over the gym. And I just think he went out there and he might have been a little too high on himself, disrespecting Rob Font. Like what Cheeto and Jose Aldo did to him, he tried to repeat it. He thought he was just going to go out there and punch Rob Font and Rob Font was going to die. And that's just not how Rob Font is. Rob Font is super tough. We've seen that since, even those fights where we're in fall, we're in October, we got Halloween coming up. Rob Font looked like he was wearing a freaking Halloween mask after his Cheeto Vera fight. And I think Yanez just maybe undervalued the skills of Rob Font, and he thought he could just go out there and punch with him and not, put his defense out the window and just go slug him and hurt him. Typically, Yanez is a very slick boxer. He's got very good setups, good power, good strike selection. decent kicks. He's got head kick knockouts in the UFC. But a lot of his success and relies on his boxing. He can stay in the pocket. He can roll with shots. He can counter. Very good switch stance fighter. Just super slick boxing. Martinez, on the other end, he's much more of a kicking based dude. Very punishing leg kicks. One of the better kickers at bantamweight, and definitely resurging. He's a guy that in boxing range, he can get touched up a little bit. He showed that against Davy Grant. I don't think he's as defensively sound as Yanez, but in kicking range, he's definitely much more of a monster than Yanez. I'm going to expect Jonathan Martinez to really start to fire leg kicks and body kicks at Yanez. And the key to this fight is, can Martinez really, really set up a lot of his striking game based off the kicks, or can Yanez crush that space and get his boxing going? Martinez has been a guy that has shown to be able to get touched up in prolonged exchanges on the feet. That's how Davy Grant got him. Mind you, Davy Grant is a dude that cracks. He's a wiry dude, but MMA math doesn't work. But Adrian Yanez had that fight with Davy Grant, took his best shots and won the fight. Very close fight. The odds don't make this any easier because it being a pick'em. Vegas thinks what I think, that this fight, it could be a tale of two fights. I'm trying to be non-biased here, but I think this knockout loss, Yanez has never really been finished like that. I mean, if you look at his record, like, he's got his only losses, split. And then back in 2014, he lost via unanimous decision, but he's never been knocked out. He's been buzzed. Randy Costa was putting in work on him, and he was able to hang tough against Costa and, make his reads and go out there and finish him. He looked so slick against Tony Kelly. His angle cutting, his footwork, his combination punching. I think he is going to go out there and he needs to take the kicks away from Martinez right away, because Martinez's kicking game is very, very dangerous. He can really hurt people with his kicks. Great body kicks, great leg kicks. He's going to be kicking. He's going to kick Yanez in the head a lot, and he's going to expect Yanez to block it. But he's going to do that to maybe try to wear down Yanez's arms. If he kicks Yanez in the head a bunch of times and Yanez has to block him, that's going to take his punching away. But I'm going to lean Yanez ever so slightly in this fight. I think he can crush the kicking space as long as he doesn't let Jonathan Martinez just kick at him from range. He can go in and get the angles going. Martinez is a lot more of a plodding dude. He is much more of a Muay Thai stance guy. And if he just crushes the space and makes this a boxing match, I think he's going to be slicker, and I think he's going to be rejuvenated. And he seems like a guy that can learn from his losses. And I think he's going to learn from his losses here. I'm going to go with Adrian Yanez to get the win. Don't think he's going to knock him out, but I could see him hurting and dropping Martinez at some point. And this is kind of make it or break it for Yanez, because he's been a highly touted prospect. Everybody loves this dude. The media loves this dude. He's so nice, man. I mean, he'll let anybody interview him. When I was a nobody, this dude gave me an interview. So we like Adrian Yanez here on Check the Kick. I'm going to go with Yanez. Moving on to the final fight of the card, we have Sodiq Yusuff versus the freaking OG and Edson Barboza. Odds on that fight, Yusuff is a pretty big favorite, kind of surprisingly. He's a minus 175 favorite. Barboza's coming back at plus 130 as the slight underdog. And this is about to be a badass fight. Barboza moving down in weight so late in his career and looking like an absolute monster is just super, super interesting. His knockout against Shane Burgos, sending Shane Burgos to the PFL with that weird delayed knockout, was super interesting. The split decision loss to Dan Ige, That was back in 2020. Split decision loss against Paul Felder. Very, very close fight. His team took that to the athletic commission. Edson Barboza has literally fought everybody. We were talking about Bobby Green. The dude's got to win against Bobby Green. The dude's fought freaking Anthony Njokuani back in 2011. Khabib Nurmagomedov, Michael Johnson, Paul Felder multiple times. Anthony Pettis beat Anthony Pettis in 2016. Pretty decent win. The jump knee against Beneil Dariush before he fought Khabib. The dude fought Beneil Dariush, knocked his ass out. Like, real quick, we're just going to look at Tim Barboza's record here, guys. Bobby Green, Michael Johnson. This is all in order, by the way. Also, he has fought Evan Dunham and Cowboy Cerrone, but we're just going to start at Bobby Green. Bobby Green, Michael Johnson, Paul Felder, Tony Ferguson, Anthony Pettis, Gilbert Melendez, Beneil Dariush, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Kevin Lee, Dan Hooker, Justin Gaethje, Paul Felder, Dan Ige, Makwan Americani. Now the competition's starting to get tear down. Makwan Americani, Shane Burgos, Giga Chikadze, Bryce Mitchell, and then Billy Q. All of that since 2014. This dude has a record like freaking RDA. Like, the dude has just fought everybody. Win, lose, or draw, the dude shows up to fight his ass off. His knockout earlier this year back in April against Billy Q, that jump knee. Billy Q is a really tough dude that's good. And the way he was able to just hit that jump knee, Barboza is such a fucking athlete, man. And when you let him do things like that Terry Adams spinning wheel kick, the spinning wheel kick that he landed on Kevin Lee, that he forever memed Kevin Lee in a loss. Barboza is one of the only dudes that in a loss, he could still turn you into a freaking meme. And that's what he did to Kevin Lee, causing him a chicken dance. Yeah, Khabib Nurmagomedov also turned him into a meme, but that's MMA. Barboza, great Muay Thai striker. His kicks, explosive. His boxing, explosive. His knees, explosive. He was one of the best leg kickers in the UFC until he fought Justin Gaethje. Sodiq Yusuff, another guy, hasn't fought in a year. His last win was against Don Shainis, short notice, goes out there, a complete squash match, guillotines him in 30 seconds. Before that, he fought in March of 22 against Alex Caceres, won a 3-round decision. Lost a unanimous decision against Arnold Allen, but prior to that had beaten Gabriel Benitez by knockout, but he almost got knocked out himself by Benitez, and then had a decision win against Andre Fili. All of those are pretty good opponents. Yusuff is a striker. He will also grapple. His fight with Arnold Allen is going to be probably the most telling fight for me here. Even his fight with Alex Caceres, like, a guy with Alex Caceres is good, and he's been getting better. But in 2022, a guy like Alex Caceres, you wouldn't expect him to hang around in a fight with Yusuff. You'd expect Yusuff to be more damaging and punishing. And then a guy like Arnold Allen, who's maybe a little bit more lower volume, was able to kind of outpunch and out-strategize Sodiq Yusuff. And when you're matched up with someone that is a better athlete than you, Sodiq is going to be a better athlete against most people, but he's not a better athlete than Barboza. Barboza is a much more explosive dude than Yusuff. Yusuff can jump on things. He'll jump on a guillotine. He has good wrestling. He can take people down. He can definitely mix up his game. But if he tries to go punch for punch and strike for strike with Barboza, might not be good for him. He's going to have to wrestle. This is a fight where he needs to show up with his wrestling shoes on. Because a lot of these dudes at 145 are not going to want to go tit for tat in a striking game with Barboza. It's just not smart. Can Barboza be hurt? Yeah, he can. He's been knocked the fuck out. Justin Gaethje knocked him out. But Sodiq Yusuff is not the puncher. He doesn't have the footwork that Justin Gaethje have. He's not as well schooled as Justin Gaethje, and he's just not as good as Gaethje. He's not as just good of a puncher, and he's not as good at setting things up. Don't be surprised if Barboza gets another like stunning knockout, because Yusuff is a guy that, he's not slow-footed, but he's not extremely fast, and he has been hit by things. Benitez was able to hurt him in their fight, and I just don't think Barboza should be an underdog here. I think this should be another dead pick'em fight. I think Barboza is being a little bit undervalued here, just based off his losses to like Giga Chikadze and stuff like that. Um, I'm not gambling on this fight, but I'm going to pick the underdog. I'm in a 5-round fight. I think you can't let Edson Barboza just hang around because he can do things. Like he just jump kneed Billy Q. He's coming off of a lot of confidence. If you've seen pictures of Barboza lately, he's absolutely shredded. Um, a guy like him at his stage of his career, he had no reason to even think about fighting at 145, but he did it, and he looks physically amazing. He looks great. Give me Barboza. Give me a Barboza to hurt Yusuff at some point in this fight. I don't know if he'll finish it, but I think he's going to hurt Yusuff. And I could be dead wrong here, but something in me is just telling me that Yusuff is a guy that will let you hang around. And if you let Barboza hang around for too long and you are going to strike with him and you're not going to impose a grappling game, he might just get hurt. Give me Barboza. And that right there, guys, is going to cap the show. We have some pretty cool fights coming up on that card as well. Jennifer Maia is fighting Viviane Araujo at flyweight. That fight just kind of doesn't matter. Terrence McKinney, shout out to Terrence McKinney. He finally got a short notice replacement. I was kind of trying to hold out because I like Terrence. Him and I have had multiple conversations together, so I like him. I was trying to hold out to do an analyst for his fight, but they finally just found him a replacement, and I could not hold out any longer. And I have no idea who Brendan Marotti is. If you guys know who he is, give me some information there. Petrosky is short notice replacing Marc-Andre Barriot. He's fighting Michel Pereira. Michel Pereira is coming up a weight class. Decent card all around, guys. That's going to cap the show. I appreciate you all for tuning in. Check the Kick Podcast, Sherdog.com. I'm Devin. Enjoy the fights.